Hi everyone. I'm Vicky Young. I'm 31 years old, and I've spent my entire life literally fighting for my place in the world. Growing up in Tucson, Arizona, I learned one thing very early on: nothing is ever just handed to you. Especially not in my family. My parents always had a favorite child, and I can tell you with certainty, it was never me. So I carved my own path. I threw every ounce of energy into my marketing career, saved every penny I could, and eventually scraped together enough to buy a small house in the suburbs. It's nothing fancy, no marble countertops or sprawling backyard. But it's mine. Every brick, every window, every creaky floorboard belongs to me. That house is my pride, my proof that I actually built something with my own two hands. Then came that family dinner at the pizza place in Tucson. You know the kind, forced small talk, plastic baskets of fries, everyone pretending we're closer than we actually are. I walked in expecting the usual routine: awkward silences, polite smiles, maybe a passive-aggressive comment from my mom about my love life. What I got instead was a bomb. My parents waited until everyone had a slice in front of them before they dropped it. "Your brother really needs your house," my mom said, like she was asking me to pass the salt. "He needs more space for his family." My dad nodded along, already chewing his pepperoni. Just like that. My home, my blood, sweat, and tears, reduced to a solution for my brother's inconvenience. And then came the applause. I'm not exaggerating. Relatives around the table actually started clapping. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all beaming like I'd just volunteered to donate a kidney. Like I'd generously offered up my entire life on a platter. My stomach twisted into knots. I sat there frozen for a second, watching them celebrate my supposed generosity, and something inside me just snapped. I laughed. Not a polite little chuckle. Not an awkward, haha, good one. I laughed loud and sharp, the kind of laugh that makes everyone stop and stare. And they did. The clapping died instantly. All eyes turned to me. I pushed my chair back, stood up with my heart hammering against my ribs, and I said something that made the whole table go completely still. Something that changed everything, just not in the way they expected. If you've ever been blindsided by the people who are supposed to love you, stick with me. I'm about to tell you how I flipped the script. When Vincent started a family, I genuinely believed that helping out was just what sisters do. He's my older brother, after all. Vincent Young always had a knack for finding trouble, and I always had a knack for bailing him out. He works as a freelance graphic designer, and don't get me wrong, he's talented. But talent doesn't pay the bills when the clients dry up. His income is a constant roller coaster: feast one month, famine the next. His wife Vanessa doesn't exactly help their situation. She works part-time at a retail store, but you'd never guess it from her spending habits. She treats every paycheck like it's the start of Black Friday. They have two kids, Aiden and Nicole, 6 and 4 years old. Sweet, innocent kids who have no idea their parents are running on empty. Those children are growing up in chaos, and for a long time, I convinced myself that I was the only thing standing between them and disaster. It started small, maybe 2 years ago. Vincent called one evening, his voice tight with embarrassment, saying their electricity was hours away from being shut off. I transferred them $200 and told myself it was a one-time emergency. Then the water bill came due. Then another electricity bill. Before I could catch my breath, I was covering their utilities every few months like it was my second mortgage. Vanessa's texts became predictable. "Vicky, we're really struggling. Can you help us out?" I'd sigh, open my banking app, and transfer whatever they needed. And every time, I'd rationalize it. This is for Aiden and Nicole. This is for the kids. Family helps family. That was my mantra. Then the car started falling apart. Their old sedan was less a vehicle and more a collection of parts held together by hope. Flat tires. Dead batteries. Strange knocking sounds that Vincent would wave off with a casual, "I'll get to it later." Spoiler alert, he never got to it later. So I got to it for him. $500 for repairs here, $300 there. I convinced myself they couldn't function without a car, not with 2 young children to cart around. My parents, Jonathan and Pamela Young, knew exactly what I was doing. They knew I was bankrolling their son's chaos. But did they ever step in? Did they ever offer to share the load? No. Mom would drop these little hints about how it's only natural for a sister to support her brother, like I was born with a built-in obligation. Dad would just suddenly become fascinated by the ceiling whenever money came up. The bills kept coming, and so did my resentment. Last year, I noticed the amounts creeping up. An $80 electric bill became $120. A minor repair turned into a $1,200 transmission replacement. I started studying my bank statements like a detective, trying to piece together where all my money was really going. Vincent never offered specifics, just a mumbled thanks that felt emptier each time. Vanessa's messages shifted from grateful to entitled, like I was just their personal ATM who had forgotten her role. At night, I'd lie in bed doing mental math, adding up years of handouts. Thousands of dollars. Money I'd saved for a new laptop, for a vacation I kept postponing, for my own future. It was evaporating, and I was letting it happen. My best friend Paige, who's a razor-sharp accountant, noticed I was wound tighter than usual. Over coffee one morning, she looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Vicky, are you still paying their bills?" I nodded, and even that small movement made my stomach clench. She frowned, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't push. Not yet. And I kept telling myself the same tired lie. Vincent is my brother. His kids deserve a stable home. I'm doing the right thing. But the weight of that right thing was crushing me. Every transfer felt like I was handing over another piece of myself. And late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd ask myself the question I was too afraid to say out loud: is family really supposed to cost you everything you are? I didn't know it then, but those doubts were seeds. And they were about to sprout into something that would change everything. It was just another Saturday night at that pizza place in Tucson. The one with the red vinyl booths and the smell of pepperoni baked into the walls. I walked in expecting exactly what we always did, a mediocre dinner wrapped in forced family bonding. I had absolutely no idea I was walking into an ambush. The place hummed with the usual chaos, conversations overlapping, kids laughing, glasses clinking. I was sitting across from Vincent and Vanessa, with Aiden and Nicole between them, happily destroying a cheese pizza. Mom and Dad held court at the head of the table, surrounded by the usual cast of aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone was in their familiar roles, swapping gossip and pretending we all genuinely liked each other. I was half listening to Vincent ramble about some freelance project, distractedly poking at my own slice, when he suddenly pushed back his chair and stood up. He cleared his throat with this exaggerated flourish, like he was about to make a toast at a wedding. The table gradually fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "You know," he announced, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear, "Vicky has that really nice house in the suburbs." He paused, letting it hang there. "She lives there all alone. But Aiden and Nicole, they need more space. A yard to play in. A real home." He spread his hands like he was presenting a gift. "I think Vicky could let us move in there. It's only fair, right?" He grinned, clearly expecting everyone to applaud his brilliance. My jaw locked so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Before I could even process the audacity, my dad nodded from the head of the table. "Makes sense," he said, like he was settling a minor debate. "Family should help family." Mom was already nodding along, gazing at me with that expectant look I knew too well. And then it happened. They started clapping. Aunts, uncles, even a few cousins, actually applauding like someone had just proposed something noble and generous. Aiden and Nicole kept chewing their pizza crusts, completely oblivious to the fact that their parents were trying to steal my life. My face went hot, then cold, then hot again. My house. The house I'd bled for. The house I'd said no to vacations for, no to new clothes for, no to 1,000 small luxuries, so I could finally have something that was truly mine. And they were discussing it like it was a spare bedroom someone wasn't using. Vincent stood there basking in the approval, smug as ever. Vanessa leaned in, whispering something to him, her earrings catching the light, probably already mentally redecorating my living room. After everything. After all the bills I'd paid, the repairs I'd covered, the thousands of dollars I'd funneled into keeping their lives afloat. They thought they could just take my house. My heart slammed against my ribs, a mix of fury and disbelief so intense I couldn't breathe for a second. I hadn't planned to speak. I never planned to speak at these things. But the words didn't ask for permission. I laughed. Not a polite little exhale. A loud, sharp, cutting laugh that sliced through the applause like a knife. The clapping died instantly. Every face at that table turned to me. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floor, and stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steady and clear. "You think I should just give up my house?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. For years, I've been paying Vincent and Vanessa's electric bills, their water bills, fixing their car. Thousands of dollars. Thousands. Out of my own pocket. And now you want my house? Silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on you. Vincent's smile evaporated like it had never existed. Vanessa's face went completely rigid, frozen mid-whisper. Forks stopped halfway to open mouths. Dad shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by his lap. Mom's lips moved, but nothing came out. A cousin stared at the table. An aunt mumbled something unintelligible into her napkin. I kept going, my voice rising, filling the space they'd left for me. I sacrificed for that house. Every sleepless night worrying about money. Every vacation I didn't take. Every single thing I went without. All of it. That house is mine. And you seriously think I should just hand it over because Vincent needs more space? I stared at my brother, waiting for him to meet my eyes. He didn't. He couldn't. And in that moment, something shifted. The doubts I'd been carrying, the guilt, the endless questions about whether I was doing enough, being enough. They didn't disappear, but they suddenly felt smaller. Lighter. Because for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about what I owed them. I was thinking about what I owed myself. Vanessa started to mumble something, probably more about the kids, but I wasn't done. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I've had enough from you too." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear someone chewing 2 tables over. Aiden tugged at Vanessa's sleeve, whispering something, confused by the tension. Nicole twisted a napkin into a tight little knot, her small face puzzled. Around the table, relatives exchanged glances that said everything and nothing. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Someone else suddenly became very interested in their phone. I sat back down. My hands were trembling against my lap, but my mind had never been clearer. All those years of swallowing my words, of smiling through the guilt trips, of telling myself I was the one being unreasonable. Gone. I had finally said it all out loud, and there was no taking it back. Vincent attempted a weak laugh, muttering something about how it was just an idea, no big deal. But everyone knew. The damage was done. The air around our table felt thick, heavy, charged like the seconds before a monsoon. The rest of that dinner was a masterclass in awkward. Nobody mentioned the house. Nobody mentioned the money. Mom made a desperate attempt to pivot to dessert, asking if anyone wanted tiramisu, her voice artificially bright. The mood was already buried 6 feet under. I ate my cold pizza in silence, feeling their stares crawl over me. And for the first time in my entire life, I genuinely didn't care what any of them thought. I had said what needed saying. The door was closed. A few days later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop in Tucson, the one where the barista starts making my drink the second I walk through the door. Paige sat across from me, composed and sharp as always, her accountant's brain probably already running numbers on something in her head. Then she leaned forward, her expression shifting. "Vicky," she said quietly, "I saw something weird on Vincent's social media." The way she said it made my stomach tighten. "What kind of weird?" "He posted a picture." She pulled out her phone. "With a new TV. A 4K, top-of-the-line model. The kind that costs more than my first car." She paused, letting that land. "Where do you think he got that kind of money?" I froze mid-sip, my cup hovering. The money I'd been sending. The bills I'd been paying. The endless transfers I'd convinced myself were keeping Aiden and Nicole fed and warm. Had it all gone to a television? Maybe he landed a big project, I heard myself say, but even I didn't believe it. Paige didn't argue. She just turned her phone around and showed me. There he was, Vincent, beaming like he'd won the lottery, standing in front of a massive flat screen that took up half his wall. Vanessa posed beside him, smiling the smile of someone who just got exactly what she wanted. The caption read, "Living the dream," with a heart emoji, star emoji, money bag emoji. Everything inside me went cold, then hot, then cold again. I had been working overtime, skipping lunches, telling myself I couldn't afford that photography course, that weekend trip, those new boots I needed. And they were living the dream on my dime. Paige scrolled further. "It gets better," she said grimly. Next photo, a brand new gaming console, still in the box. Then, expensive headphones, the kind audiophiles obsess over. Then, Vanessa, holding up a designer handbag like she'd just been named queen of something. Each image hit like a slap. A physical sting. I stared at the screen, and for a long moment, I couldn't breathe. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop glowing in the dark, scrolling through years of bank statements. Page after page of transactions. Hundreds of dollars every few months. Utility payments. Car repairs. 500 here. 1,200 there. It all blurred together into a river of money flowing out of my account and into their chaos. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Streaming subscriptions. Netflix. Hulu. A couple of others. All coming out of my card every single month. For over a year. I had never authorized any of it. Never once agreed to pay for their entertainment. And there it was, hidden in the fine print of my own generosity. I kept scrolling. Phone bills. Their numbers, tacked onto my family plan, month after month, without a single word of explanation or thanks. I added it all up. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. Not for emergencies. Not for the kids. For their comfort. Their luxuries. Their shiny, meaningless toys. My head spun. I felt sick. Stupid. Used. The people I had sacrificed for, the brother I had bailed out more times than I could count, the sister-in-law who texted me like I was their personal bank, they had been playing me the whole time. I called Paige, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form words. "You were right, I managed. They were just using me." Paige didn't say, "I told you so." She never does. She just listened while I ranted, while I spilled years of frustration into the phone. When I finally ran out of words, she asked the only question that mattered. "What are you going to do about it?" I didn't hesitate. Not for one single second. The answer was already there, waiting for me to have the courage to say it. The next morning, I picked up my phone and started calling every utility company I could think of. One by one, I detached my name from Vincent's accounts. Electric. Water. Gas. Each call was like pulling out a tiny knife that had been stuck in me for years. Then I logged into the streaming services, changed every password, and watched their access disappear. I called the phone company and removed their numbers from my family plan. Click. Done. Click. Done. And for the first time, I saw everything clearly. My brother and his wife weren't struggling survivors fighting to keep their heads above water. They were con artists running a long game, and I was the mark. Every dollar I'd sent, every transfer I'd made with a prayer that it would help Aiden and Nicole, had been funneled straight into their shiny adult toys. The betrayal wasn't just deep. It was physical. It sat in my chest like something heavy and broken. I kept seeing Vincent's face at that dinner, that smug grin, that entitled confidence. Vanessa leaning in to whisper, probably calculating how my living room would fit their new TV. They actually believed they deserved my money, my sweat, my sacrificed dreams. I had given up so much. A photography course I'd wanted since college. A trip to the coast I'd talked about for years. Little things, big things, all set aside because family comes first. And for what? So they could pose in front of a 4K television they didn't need, holding designer bags they couldn't afford? I paced my living room like a caged animal, anger and grief wrestling inside me. My phone buzzed. Paige, checking in. "You okay?" I typed back with shaking fingers. "That's it. I'm done." Her reply came instantly. "Good. You don't owe them anything." She was right. I had spent years convinced I wasn't doing enough for my family. Years of guilt, of lying awake wondering if I should give more, be more, sacrifice more. When the truth was, I had already given too much. This wasn't family. This was a con. And cutting them off hurt like ripping off a bandage from an infected wound, but underneath, I could already feel the air hitting skin for the first time in years. Liberating. Terrifying. Necessary. I sank onto my couch and stared at my banking app. All those numbers, finally mine again. Every dollar accounted for. No more mysterious deductions. No more emergencies. Just my money in my account, waiting for my dreams. I knew they wouldn't let this go quietly. Vincent and Vanessa had fed off me for too long to just slink away. I had turned off the tap, and they would come pounding on the door. But I was ready. The woman who laughed nervously at that dinner, who transferred money with a sigh and a guilty conscience, she was gone. I wasn't their ATM anymore. The calls started the next morning. First, my mother. Her voice carried that familiar tone of disappointment, the one she'd perfected over decades. "Vicky, how could you do this to your brother?" I gripped the phone, knuckles whitening. "Do what, Mom?" "Cut off your support. Aiden and Nicole need a stable home. This is cruel." I took a breath and tried to explain. Calmly. Rationally. I told her about the TV. The gaming console. The designer bag. The subscriptions I'd been paying for without knowing. But she wasn't listening. "Family makes sacrifices," she interrupted. "You have a whole house you live in all alone. Think of the children, Vicky. Think of your own flesh and blood." The words landed like stones, but I didn't flinch. "I'm not bailing them out anymore, Mom. I'm done." She was quiet for a second. Then, selfish. And the line went dead. 10 minutes later, Vincent called. His voice was different now, desperate, almost wheedling. The confidence from the dinner table was gone. "Vicky, look, we're in real trouble here. The kids can't live like this. You've always helped us. Please, just one more time. I'm begging you." In the background, I heard Vanessa whispering, feeding him lines. The same old script. The same manipulation. Wrapped in children's faces. "No," I said. My voice shook, but it held. "I'm done, Vincent. You've had enough of my money." He switched tactics immediately, his voice sharpening. "Oh, so you're just going to embarrass us in front of the whole family and then abandon your own nieces and nephew? Real classy, Vicky." I ended the call. My heart hammered, but underneath the chaos, there was something else. Clarity. Peace. I wasn't playing their game anymore. Then the text came. From Vanessa. It was long, novel-length, filled with dramatic flourishes. "The kids are suffering because of you. How do you sleep at night knowing Aiden and Nicole are sitting in a dark apartment with no lights because their aunt cut them off? You're their family. You're supposed to protect them. I hope you're proud of yourself." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. For a moment, just a moment, the old guilt flickered. What if they really were struggling? What if I'd made a mistake? Then I remembered the photo. Vincent grinning in front of that massive screen. Vanessa holding up her designer bag. The gaming console. The headphones. All paid for with my money meant for keeping their children warm and fed. I didn't reply. I set the phone down and walked away. I had let their sob stories pull me back too many times. Not anymore. Now, I saw right through them. And what I saw was ugly, manipulative, and absolutely not my responsibility. Then the online storm hit. I was scrolling through Facebook during a quiet moment, half-heartedly sipping coffee, when I saw it. A post from my mother. Public. Visible to every relative, every family friend, every acquaintance who had ever known us. "Some people forget what family means," it read. "Turning your back on your own brother and his children is a disgrace." She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. My father shared it within minutes, adding his own flourish. Raised a daughter who only cares about her own well-being. Period. Vincent commented underneath, "Guess a house is more important than your nieces and nephew for some people." But Vanessa's post was the one that truly gutted me. A photo of Aiden and Nicole, their little faces arranged in matching sad expressions, the kind of staged photo that parents take when they want to prove how hurt they are. The caption read, "When family lets you down." Period. My blood didn't just boil. It erupted. They were doing it. They were actually painting me as the villain, the selfish daughter, the ungrateful sister who abandoned her own flesh and blood. The comments rolled in like a tide. Friends from high school I hadn't spoken to in years. Distant cousins I'd met twice. Even neighbors from my parents' street. All chiming in. How could she? Poor kids. They don't deserve this. Some people have no heart. My fingers itched to respond. To lay it all out, the years of bills, the thousands of dollars, the TV, the designer bag, the streaming subscriptions they'd stolen. I wanted to scream the truth from that comment section until everyone understood. But I stopped myself. My thumb hovered over the keyboard and I forced myself to think. If I started defending myself, I'd be playing their game. I'd be stepping into their drama, giving them exactly what they wanted: attention, reaction, proof that they could still get under my skin. I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. Instead, I reported every single post for harassment. Then I locked down my profile so tight that not even a rumor could slip through. My phone buzzed and buzzed with notifications, a constant angry hum, and I turned it off. I set it face down on the counter and walked outside. I sat on my porch, watching the sun sink over Tucson, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that I usually loved. But that evening, the weight of their words pressed down on me. For a moment, just a moment, doubt crept in. Had I been too harsh? Too final? Was I really the monster they were making me out to be? Then I remembered. The bank statements. The unauthorized subscriptions. The photos of their luxury haul, paid for with my sacrifice. They used me. They lied to me. And now, because I finally said no, they were trashing me publicly. That wasn't love. That wasn't family. That was revenge. The next day at work, I told a colleague about it. Not everything, just enough. She listened, then shook her head with the weary wisdom of someone who had seen similar things. That's what families do when they lose control over you, she said simply. She was right. Their attacks had nothing to do with Aiden and Nicole's well-being. It was about control. I had taken it back, and they were furious. That night, when I walked through the door of my house, the very house they had tried to claim, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet relief. The burden was gone. For so long, I had carried them on my back, convinced I owed them everything. Now I was free. Their online words couldn't touch that. I knew they would keep pushing, but I was ready. I would stand my ground no matter what. Reality, as it tends to do, caught up with Vincent and Vanessa faster than anyone expected. About 2 months after I cut them off, my phone rang during my lunch break. Paige. Her voice was a mix of shock and something softer, almost pity. Vicky, you are not going to believe this. I leaned back in my office chair, staring out at the Tucson skyline. What happened? Vincent and Vanessa got evicted. They couldn't pay the rent. The words hung in the air. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of me winced. Not for them, but for Aiden and Nicole, 2 innocent kids caught in the wreckage of their parents' choices. But surprise? No, I wasn't surprised at all. My brother and his wife had spent years living on my money, treating it like an endless resource while ignoring their own responsibilities. The boomerang was finally coming back. Paige filled me in with the details she'd gathered from the gossip network, mutual friends, loose-lipped acquaintances, and the occasional post that slipped through privacy settings. The landlord had warned them multiple times, multiple chances to get their act together. But without my payments covering their utilities and car, without that invisible safety net, they crumbled. They packed up whatever fit into their aging sedan, probably including that massive TV, and landed in a cheap motel on the outskirts of Tucson. I knew the kind of place. Flickering neon sign. Walls thin enough to hear your neighbors' arguments. A room so small that a family of 4 couldn't turn around without bumping into each other. Aiden and Nicole, I learned, were sleeping on a pull-out couch that had definitely seen better decades. Their toys, what little they could bring, were crammed into plastic bins stacked in the corner. I closed my eyes and saw them. 2 little kids, confused and crowded, huddled together in a strange room that smelled like stale smoke and desperation. My heart ached. Genuinely ached. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't choose their parents. But I also knew the truth. If I stepped in now, if I opened that door even a crack, Everything would start over. The calls, the guilt trips, the manipulation. They would learn nothing, and I would be right back where I started, drained and resentful. I couldn't save them by drowning myself. I had finally learned that lesson, and it had cost me years to understand. My parents, Jonathan and Pamela, tried to step in and help, but the truth was they barely had enough to keep their own heads above water. Dad's pension was modest, and Mom's part-time hours at the local library paid in pocket change and overdue book jokes. They scraped together a small loan for Vincent and Vanessa, a couple $100 that probably meant skipping a few meals themselves. But it was a drop in an empty bucket, nowhere near enough to cover back rent or secure a new place. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer, but some old reflex pulled my thumb across the glass. Her voice sounded different. Tired. Worn down in a way I hadn't heard before. Guilty. Vicky, she said slowly, I was just wondering, have you changed your mind at all? About helping? For the kid's sake. I listened. I let her words settle. Then I answered, my voice firm but not unkind. No, Mom. They need to figure this out on their own. I've done enough. She didn't argue. Didn't fight. Just let out a long, heavy sigh that carried decades of disappointment and resignation. Then she hung up. Dad never even tried to call. I think by then he understood. I wasn't going to budge. Not for guilt. Not for memory. Not for anything. Paige kept me loosely informed, though I never asked. She'd hear things from acquaintances, people who lived near that motel, mutual friends who still talked. Vincent was scrambling, desperately hunting for side gigs, but his reputation had caught up with him. Word gets around when you're unreliable, when you burn bridges and expect others to build you new ones. Vanessa picked up extra shifts at the store, working longer for the same poverty wages, but it was like trying to fill the ocean with a teaspoon. They'd already started selling their treasures, the gaming console, the headphones, probably more I didn't know about. The money came and went like smoke. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. Their life was crumbling, brick by brick, and for the first time in my adult life, it wasn't my job to show up with a trowel and mortar. That chapter was closed. In those weeks, something shifted inside me. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next demand to land in my inbox. Instead, I turned inward. Toward myself. I finally did it. I signed up for that photography course I'd been dreaming about for years. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, I packed my camera and drove to the community center, where a group of strangers became something like friends. We learned about aperture and composition, about capturing light and shadow. But more than that, I learned to see the world differently. The desert sunsets I'd always loved, the ones I'd watched alone from my porch, suddenly became mine to keep. Not just memories, but images I could hold onto. My bank account, after years of being drained, slowly began to heal. Every paycheck stayed where it belonged. Every dollar had a purpose, and that purpose was me. In the evenings, I'd sit in my living room, in the very house they had tried to claim, and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Quiet, steady pride. This house was mine because I built it. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. I wasn't the villain they painted online. I was just someone who finally got tired of carrying a weight that was never mine to bear. Sometimes, late at night, my mind would drift to Aiden and Nicole. 2 kids who didn't choose any of this. I'd wonder if they were okay, if they were scared, if they understood what was happening around them. But every time that thought surfaced, I'd remember. Vanessa's manipulative texts. Vincent's entitled demands. My mother's accusations. They had built their lives on the assumption that I would always be there, always available, always paying. They had gotten so comfortable living off handouts that they forgot how to stand on their own. Now the safety net was gone, and they were learning the hardest lesson of all. Paige summed it up perfectly when we met for coffee one weekend. We sat at our usual spot, the barista already making my drink, and she stirred her latte with that knowing look. They thought you'd cave, she said. They really believed you'd come running back. But you didn't. That's their problem now. Her words landed like a period at the end of a very long sentence. I had done the right thing. Years of my life, my money, my energy, my dreams, all poured into them like water into sand. Now they were facing the consequences of their own choices, and I was finally, actually living for myself. I didn't know what they would do next. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel the slightest obligation to find out. For the first time in years, my phone was silent. Not the angry silence of notifications ignored, but a peaceful stillness. And in that stillness, I truly understood what freedom felt like. After months of calls I didn't answer and messages I didn't read, I took the final step. The one I'd been circling for a while, knowing it was necessary, but still dreading the finality of it. I blocked them, one by one. My mom, my dad, Vincent, Vanessa. My finger trembled slightly over each contact, a last whisper of the guilt they'd spent decades installing in me. But every time I hit that block button, something lifted. A weight. A chain. A rope that had been tied around my wrists since childhood. No more reproaches. No more accusations disguised as concern. No more guilt trips packaged as love. My whole life, I had been tethered to their demands. Their expectations. Their version of who I was supposed to be. And now, finally, I had cut the rope. My house in Tucson, the one they had tried to take from me, became what it was always meant to be. A sanctuary. A place where I could breathe without someone asking for more. Where I could live without performing someone else's idea of family. Where I could simply be myself, whoever that was turning out to be. And you know what? I was starting to like her. I threw myself into that photography course like it was the only thing keeping me afloat. And in a way, it was. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, I packed my camera and drove to the community center, where a room full of strangers became something I hadn't expected, a new kind of family. Hobbyists and dreamers, retirees with too much time and young artists with too little money. They asked nothing of me. No loans, no favors, no guilt. Just shared laughter and advice about aperture, lighting, and how to capture the perfect desert sunset. I'd come home on those nights and upload my shots, scrolling through each image like they were pieces of a puzzle I was finally solving. Silhouettes of saguaro cacti against burning skies. A lone hawk circling above the sand. The way the last light hit the mountains, turning them purple and gold. I printed my favorites and pinned them to a board in my living room, right where I could see them every morning. Each photograph was a reminder. I was building something now. Something that belonged only to me. My savings grew. Slowly at first, then with a steadiness I hadn't felt in years. No mysterious withdrawals. No sudden emergencies. Just my money sitting there, waiting for my dreams. And those dreams were getting bigger. I started planning a trip to the Grand Canyon, something I'd talked about for so long it had become a joke I told myself. But now the joke was becoming real. I could almost feel the red rocks under my fingers. Paige would occasionally pass along news about Vincent and Vanessa, though I never asked. She knew I didn't want details, but she also knew I deserved to know the shape of their lives without me. They were still in that rundown motel, the one with the flickering sign and the paper-thin walls. Scraping by on odd jobs and whatever they could sell. Aiden and Nicole had transferred to a new school, one with fewer resources and more crowded classrooms. From what Paige heard, they were struggling to adjust. New kids always do, especially when they arrive with chaos in their luggage. My heart clenched every time I thought of those two. They were innocent in all of this, just kids caught in the wake of their parents' poor choices. But I also knew the truth that haunted me. If I reached out, if I tried to rescue them, I'd drown right alongside them. The current was too strong, and I had barely made it to shore myself. Vincent had found part-time work at a warehouse, but his reputation as unreliable followed him like a shadow. He was barely making minimum wage, barely keeping his head above the rising water. Vanessa picked up extra shifts at the store, working longer for the same poverty paycheck. Mom and Dad, stretched thin themselves, could only manage occasional groceries, a bag of food left at the motel door like a charitable offering. Their lives now were the negative image of those flashy posts they'd shared when I was funding their lifestyle. No more living the dream. No more designer bags or unboxing videos. Just survival, day by day, dollar by dollar. I didn't feel schadenfreude. No satisfaction in their suffering. Just a quiet, steady resolve. Their struggles weren't a punishment I'd inflicted. They were the natural result of years spent living off someone else's labor. I had given them thousands for electricity, for car repairs, for subscriptions they never thanked me for. I had given thinking that's what family does. But I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Family isn't endless self-sacrifice. Family isn't a blank check with your name on it. It all came down to one word. A tiny word, 2 letters, but it held more power than anything I'd ever said before. No. Saying it at that dinner, watching their faces freeze. Saying it when I cut off the payments, feeling the weight lift. Saying it when they begged, when they pleaded, when they tried every manipulation they knew. No, that was my power. Not cruelty, not revenge. Just the simple act of protecting my own dignity. Now my life was defined by different things. My home, the one they couldn't take. My work, which was finally mine again. My photographs, pinned to the wall like trophies of a battle I'd won with myself. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit on my porch and look up at the stars over Tucson. The sky here is so big it makes you feel small, but in a good way. In a way that reminds you your problems are just specks in something vast and beautiful. I'd think about what I'd lost. Not just the money, though that stung. The years. The energy. The pieces of myself I'd handed over, hoping to be enough for people who were never going to see me as enough. I'd wonder sometimes, did Mom or Dad ever regret their words? Did Vincent and Vanessa understand what they'd thrown away? But those thoughts came less often now, and when they did, they faded faster. I wasn't angry anymore. I had simply closed that chapter, put the book back on the shelf, and walked away. Cutting contact wasn't revenge. It was survival. And I regretted nothing. My life was mine again. And I was finally, truly living. Looking back, I see how easy it is to fall into that trap. The trap of family expectations, of believing you owe because you share blood, that love requires sacrifice until there's nothing left of you. But real love, the kind that matters, doesn't come with a price tag. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand you shrink yourself to fit someone else's needs. My story isn't unique. I know that. Chances are, some of you reading this have felt that same pressure, that same guilt for not being able to give more than you had. The same voice whispering that you're selfish, that you're failing, that family comes first no matter the cost. Here's what I learned. A boundary isn't selfishness. It's strength. Saying no doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you whole. It makes you someone who knows where you end and someone else begins. Vincent and Vanessa are still out there somewhere. Still in that motel, probably, still scraping, still struggling. Stuck in the consequences of their own choices. And I'm here. Free. Moving toward my own dreams, one photograph, one sunset, one day at a time. To everyone who listened to my story, thank you. It means more than you know to share this, to put it out into the world and hope that somewhere, someone nods along. Someone feels that same spark, that same urge to stand up and claim their own life. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family? Have you ever had to say no and mean it, knowing it might change everything? Write in the comments. Share your story. I'll be reading.